this episode will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie and you're worried about that, then here's your spoiler warning.
But if we want to just quickly go over spoil free, greatly recommend the movie.
Yes, we would definitely both recommend it. I think both of us were quite worried that we weren't going to enjoy it.
Yeah, as frustratingly, a lot with this Phase 4 stuff that's coming out now, I'm finding that there's a lot of negativity towards it, mainly because we're now moving away from the MCU we've had for the past 10 years.
We're losing the actors that, you know, we grew up with and grew fond of over the course of, a decade?
Yeah, and change isn't always necessarily welcomed. And so I've seen a lot of negativity and criticism towards Shang-Chi and the Eternals, which I hope to see soon, but I'm glad I finally got to watch Shang-Chi. Loved it.
I was pleasantly surprised that, it's a shame to say pleasantly surprised.
It is.
That the director wasn't a white man. I shouldn't have to be pleasantly surprised by that. It should be a given.
Yeah.
Considering all the characters and the Asian culture that's being represented.
Yeah.
Specifically, it's set in... It's Chinese culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most, if not all, of this appears to be based in Chinese culture and law.
Yeah.
If I'm wrong on that, I am very sorry. However...
They do speak Mandarin.
Yeah.
And it's not just at the start, it's consistently spoken throughout the movie.
Yeah. And it's mixed in with English.
Yeah.
So English-speaking audiences don't feel too alienated, which I feel is, sorry to say, it's a thing.
When it comes down to it, there's a very big white fan base with Marvel, and...
Yeah, large English-speaking audience.
Yep.
And if English isn't spoken for very long, I think it would be highly likely that many people would begin to just tune it out and begin to dismiss it.
And then they wouldn't be paying attention to the story, so they would say it's a terrible story when really they just weren't listening.
And I personally do watch shows and movies in other languages, so I'm very used to not necessarily trying to decipher the language I'm hearing, but listen out for emotion, inflection, tone, while also then reading the subtitles at the same time.
I have subtitles on with everything I watch, and I think I have some kind of auditory processing disorder.
Yeah.
And so going to the movies can be quite a mission for me.
Yeah.
Because if I don't understand what's being said, then I'm losing pieces.
Unfortunately, the movies is the only format I can actually watch media without subtitles.
Because for you, subtitles is more of a choice.
It's a choice, but also a comfort.
Yeah.
As it's kind of like a safety net for me.
Yeah. There was the main character, Shang-Chi. A thing that I didn't understand with him was the accent choice. Why did he have an American accent when he went to America when he was, 14?
Yeah.
He shouldn't have that accent. But now thinking about it, it'll be so that it's palatable to an American audience.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways they tried to sort of play it off in the movie was by getting him speaking English at a young age. But of course...
Well, that kind of gets contradicted, though, because in the story where he's talking about his high school experience, he mentions that his English wasn't very good, and Katie came to his rescue.
Well, also keep in mind, at that point, he was trying to fabricate a new life, and he was trying to play himself off as just this kid from Asia.
Yeah, but he was also trying to hide from his father. He did a terrible job with the name, of course.
Yeah.
Sean.
Yeah.
Which Katie points out.
Yeah, and so, we meet Sean and Katie. What was it after the title sequence? Because we began the movie following...
Yeah, we met them after, because there's the introduction of his mother and his father.
That's right.
And when his mother and father are fighting, and that scene was amazingly done.
Oh, yeah.
When we were watching it, I even said to Saf that it looked more like they were dancing than fighting. and one look that I can't even remember the mother's name, which I feel a little whoopsies. But the mother gives his father this one look. And I said to Saf, I was like, if someone looked at me like that, I would fall in love. And what do you know? They fell in love. Can't blame the guy. Fair enough.
Yeah, so it started off introducing Wenwu, who ends up, which we then is revealed later on to be the name of Shang-Chi's father. And then, yeah, it begins to explain how he has lived for about 1,000 years being
a terrible person.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a cliche that he was this horrible person until he met this woman.
Yeah.
And she changed him, and they had kids together, and they had a life together, and then she's killed, and he's lost. He doesn't know who he is, and he goes back to being a terrible person.
We have seen this trope before.
Yeah.
Which I don't necessarily feel is to the detriment of the film.
No, it's not. It's definitely not to the detriment.
You're only thinking about that now.
Thought about that now.
Because we have actually come 10 minutes off watching the film.
Yes. So
chucked on the microphone.
It's very fresh in our minds.
Yeah. But also because of that, I think it's possible we might end up skipping one or two things and backtracking throughout this. We see Sean and Katie. I personally felt as though, what's he up to? Like, what's going on? In the trailers, we saw this martial arts badass.
Saf saw the trailers, I did not, so I went into this completely blind.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to be doing the same kind of magic that there is in Doctor Strange. That's not the case at all.
No, but then I was also thinking, is this going to be like in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, how Peter Parker is an absolute doofus and can't really do much as Peter Parker, but then he excels as Spider-Man. However, I don't feel that ended up being the case. It was that Shang-Chi was finding his own identity and created his own personality.
He was trying to protect himself.
Yeah, and he was trying to live a life away from the 10 Rings and his past.
I mean, fair enough.
I mean, yeah.
As Dad sent him off to kill someone to avenge his mother.
Yeah.
That would mess any 14-year-old up.
Especially after they watched their mother die. Well, I think it might have been 6 years prior.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I think he was 8 when she died.
Something that I think was done quite well is the dynamic between the two friends, Shang-Chi and Katie. They did that quite well. They were also, I feel it was a bit of a fine line of Katie could be comedic relief.
Yep.
But if they weren't careful, she would get to an obnoxious point.
Yep.
And there was only one point in the movie where I found her sort of overreactions obnoxious. And that was when they saw, what's that little creature's name?
Morris.
When they saw Morris.
For the first time?
Yeah. The way they were freaking out felt overacted to me.
Okay.
But I also have a pretty short tether when it comes to that stuff.
Yep.
My patience wears thin when I think someone's being obnoxious.
Yeah. Although I think they potentially, the people that made this film, saw the impact and popularity of Darcy in the Thor movies. And then in WandaVision.
And then in WandaVision, yeah.
And I felt Katie played a similar role to Darcy.
Similar in a sense, but they are completely different characters.
Yeah.
Because Darcy is sarcastic and wicked intelligent.
Yeah.
Whereas Katie, she is intelligent because doesn't she have a qualification from like one of the top schools?
I think she does.
They mention it offhand that she has a good qualification and she could be doing something with it.
That's right. Her mother was annoyed that she's being a valet instead of...
Her friend also gives her a bit of shit.
That's right.
Because she's a valet. But hey, that comes in handy. Yeah. When she has to drive a bus that's falling apart. Oh, dick move by Shang-Chi using that poor woman's laptop to fend off one strike. That annoyed me so much, because that was not necessary, dude.
It
You
wasn't.
did not need to, and the time you turned around, grabbed her laptop and held it up, you could have stepped back.
And
This poor woman, they even thought she was working on some kind of research paper on the bus. She's just lost all of that, and I doubt that hard drive was retrievable, because that thing got slashed right in half.
oh, and she was on the bus, weren't saved to the cloud.
Yeah, no.
Nah.
That poor woman. Although, do you think maybe she would get an extension for extreme circumstances?
Well, there is pretty clear evidence of it.
Yeah. We both had a bit of a chuckle when the guy who was live streaming the fight, he is in season 1 of You.
Yeah.
I was amused to see him, but I'm also glad that he's getting other acting roles.
Yeah. Although in both he has played more of a comedic role.
And this one was definitely a very small role, but
It was
he had
small
a-
but effective.
he had a speaking part in the MCU. That'll look great when he goes to other auditions.
Absolutely. And it was great because it showed another sort of bystander civilian perspective of
Yep.
seeing an instance like this within the MCU.
First thing he does, whips out his phone. Not
Yeah.
even just recording it, he's live streaming it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, he's not even going to care about his data bill from that. He's not even going to care about those ridiculous data charges.
Worth it. He'll probably make it all back.
Oh, yeah. We see, I think it's only about 10 minutes after that title sequence, we've met Shang-Chi and Katie, and we've begun to get an idea for their dynamic.
We met Katie's family.
Katie's family are like, when are you two going to get married? Shang-Chi's like, nah, we're just
We're
mates.
just friends. And that, I just want to talk about this briefly. At the start of the movie, I was like, I'm going to be so annoyed if they end up kissing.
Yeah,
And guess what? They didn't kiss.
I know.
Happiest I have ever been. They like rest their head on each other's. They rest their heads on each other
Yeah.
after a pretty traumatic fight, and I was
Yeah.
worried. I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
I was like, are they really gonna do that? And then they didn't kiss,
No.
and I was so glad, because they're so good as friends, and not everything has to be a relationship.
Yeah.
I was so glad
Yeah.
that they're friends.
Yeah.
I'm also glad that Wong took her along too, because
Oh, yeah.
imagine if she just got left behind.
Oh, that would have been awkward.
She's like, I shot this big dragon thing and nothing.
I saw it more as like a bat demon.
I don't know.
Well,
Do you think it has any ties to actual mythology?
it's entirely possible, which we don't actually know about, which in some ways is well, not in some ways, it is a shame.
Yeah.
Well,
But in saying that, it's a bit like how if a movie were to come out with Māori gods and stuff in it.
yeah,
I mean, everyone thinks that
Maui.
the story of Moana
Yeah.
is Hawaiian.
Well, it is.
It's not. It's not Hawaiian.
Well, Hawaiian and...
Native Hawaiians have said this is not Hawaiian.
Mm,
It's definitely based on more than one Polynesian culture,
yeah.
but Native Hawaiians have said this isn't Hawaiian. You're not going to know every
No.
mythology. It's impossible to know that, but hopefully it's a way to intrigue some people of looking into it, of like, oh, does this actually have mythological ties? Because the little... I forgot his name. Was it Morris?
Yeah.
Little Morris, he has ties.
Yeah. But then also the close tie between Morris and Trevor Slightly.
You know, I couldn't remember his name. I was literally just going to call him the actor.
Yeah.
I think if we hadn't watched that little short, the documentary...
I think that's why they've released it. Because they've made way more of those, but they only put that one up.
Oh yeah, they'll be releasing it in bits like they did with like...
These were filmed years ago.
Oh really?
Yeah, these are old.
Oh.
I think it's because that one shot had Trevor being abducted by the Ten Rings.
Mm.
And then
I think if we hadn't seen that, it would have been a bit more confusing to see him. They briefly explain it of like,
yeah,
you know, I was
in prison.
I was in prison, and your dad didn't like that someone else was using his name, so they brought me here and they were going to kill me, but then I performed Macbeth.
Yeah.
Which Yep, very fitting to his character.
Absolutely. He seems to be able to just sort of tumble his way through all this just due to his acting, which he explains was influenced by, what was it, Planet of the Apes? I think it was Planet of the Apes, wasn't it? And he still has no idea what's going on with that.
Yeah, how did they
get the monkeys to act?
Yeah, how'd they get them to it's all pretend, Pet. Well, if monkeys can be good actors, I can be a good actor. They're just pretending to ride horses. Oh, bud.
Yeah.
In saying that, that's not such an unreasonable thing for someone to think.
Well, not as a child.
But even to continue thinking it as an adult, I feel like people would fall for that.
Well, I feel like that's also just part of the character. He's not.
Oh, it's definitely part of the character.
He's not quite onto it.
No, he's not.
He has good acting talents, but not necessarily the intellect to go along with it.
I'm glad they kind of briefly explained as to what he thought he was doing when he was playing the Mandarin.
Yeah.
Mentioning that, oh yeah, this guy's with, what was it, BBC?
Yeah.
Because I kind of thought, what on earth did
yeah.
What did he think he was doing? What did he think this was being used for?
Yeah. And it was kind of cool with the fact that they brought up the whole Iron Man 3 thing, because even though it's very clearly linked, at the same time,
the Mandarin coming from the meal.
Yeah.
And the dad being like, they're scared of an orange.
Yep. What I kind of was the fact that it was then encouraging people to go back to Iron Man 3, which was considered one of the low points in the MCU, from my understanding at least.
And then when they were in his sister's little fight club, there was one of those hot dudes.
Yep, one of
the spicy boys,
the extremist soldiers, and we were seeing little bits from throughout the MCU being played there.
We saw Abomination.
At least I'm pretty sure it was Abomination.
I'm pretty sure it is.
From what I understand of what other people were saying, that is Abomination. But it's been so many years since I've watched Hulk. The Incredible Hulk.
They could also be trying to bring him back in another way.
Yeah. But people.
Let's be honest, who watches those Hulk movies? No. I've never seen them.
I can't remember whether it was the same character name. Because it's just been so long, and I've seen people trying to say it's the same character, but I can't be certain.
His face was unsettling. It was a very human-looking face. I didn't like that.
That's kind of the point.
I know, but it was. I did not like it. Yeah. His sister is amazing.
Oh yeah.
She's stronger than him.
Yeah.
And she had to teach herself.
Yeah.
She taught herself from watching The Boys.
Yeah. Yeah. And
she's better than her older brother.
Yeah, this movie was great for female empowerment. Not just for Asian representation, but also female representation.
Yep.
And even the combination of those two types of representation together. Yeah. It was incredible. I say as a white girl.
Yeah. The auntie as well. She seems to have she has quite a position of power.
Yeah. And what I loved is that they also played on the idea that everyone was going to assume that the dragon was male.
Yes, because the dragon is explicitly described as female.
Yep. They explicitly use she, her pronouns for the dragon.
Dragon in the Insta bio has she, her. Who the hell was looking at that dragon's vagina to be able to tell it's a girl?
I'm not even sure if the dragon has genitalia.
Then how are they just going to assign it a gender?
Maybe through communicating with the dragon.
You really think they can communicate with the dragon?
Yeah. They've been there for thousands of years with these mythical creatures. I think they might be able to communicate. If Trevor can communicate with Morris, they can communicate.
Trevor did a lot of hard drugs in his time. He's not a good point of reference.
Opening your third eye. You drugs.
Oh, God.
Action was magnificent.
Yes, the fight scenes were very well done.
Yeah, with incredible cinematography to go along with them.
Yep.
Because it could have been really easy to just have your boring old shots with people just pretending to whack each other.
It would be very easy to fall into the standard Marvel action sequences.
Yeah.
Because we see it over and over in every movie.
Yeah.
But this one is refreshing because of the acting style.
Yeah.
It's based on traditional martial arts.
Yeah.
And it's called arts for a reason.
Yeah.
It's very artistic.
Oh yeah. And I think they had a good balance between action, drama, and comedy.
They very easily could have overused... Is the actor's name Trevor?
Yes.
They very easily could have overused Trevor.
Yeah.
I'm glad they didn't have him running around like an idiot during that big fight.
Yeah.
And he just laid down and played dead.
I mean, it's also very fitting for the character, I feel.
Oh, very.
Yeah.
Very fitting. But I'm glad he wasn't just running around like a dork.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Because he would have been a complete liability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I understand why, because it was two mythical creatures. But I think it's a shame that the majority of the big fight would have
so heavily CGI.
It would have been completely CGI.
Yeah, and then they would have had similarly. Oh god, I feel bad. I don't entirely know how to pronounce his name, but I think it's Simu Liu. They would have had him and the others, all rigged up in green screen voids.
Yep.
They probably would have had a lot of them just all rigged up in these green screen boxes or voids, and
yeah, like I get it, because they couldn't really, it's not like they could do that stuff practically, but I think it's a shame that because of the build-up of powerful beings that Marvel is using, they've got to a point where humans aren't enough. Now we need these huge mythological creatures, but it's meaning that all these big fights are being done in post-production.
Yeah. And I mean, you even pointed out while we were watching, in a sequence where Shang-Chi fell into the water, you could tell he was on the box. He was
clearly sitting on a green screen box because of the way that his legs were falling down, and you could tell by how his back was straight. So it would have been like on the back and hips.
Yeah. You
could tell if he was actually falling into water, he wouldn't have been...
No.
His torso wouldn't have been up while his arms and legs were down.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it looked like he sort of put an action figure of sorts and tried to angle it, but the thing is that they have no articulation in the hip and lower back.
Yep.
So they look like a tablecloth.
Oh my god. A tablecloth.
It's the best thing I could think of in the moment.
Though I suppose it would have looked even more awkward if he was laying on a box and had his arms and legs up.
Although, what I feel they could have done, maybe, is that
would have looked like a pair of tongs.
What I think they could have done was that they could have
put him in water.
Yes, they could have practically put him in water, or they could have had him once again in the green screen void and have him suspended with the rigging.
I feel like the best way to get around that was dunk him in a pool.
Yeah.
Or dunk a stunt double in a pool.
Yeah. But I think it was also good watching the tension between Shang-Chi and his father.
Yep.
Because I can understand.
I was actually surprised when Shang-Chi has all the rings and he's like making this big yellow ball and then he doesn't use it. I was actually surprised by that. I wasn't expecting him to just like drop it like that. It makes sense for
just drop the rings.
Yeah, it makes sense for his character, but I kind of thought he was going to whack his dad with that.
That's what they were gearing up towards.
Yeah, they were.
Because they've shown just how heavily Shang-Chi's father would rely on the rings.
He was nothing without the rings.
No, he wasn't. And his attempt to live without the rings.
He's not very good at being immortal if a little soul-sucking thing could steal his soul and kill him.
Well, when it comes down to it, he was mortal, but the rings extended his life.
Regardless, he had the rings. He had the rings on when his soul got sucked out.
Yeah.
So they're obviously not very good rings if they can't save his soul.
I feel like you're giving too much credit to the rings.
Well, if they kept him alive for 1,000 years, I think they deserve some credit. Still, I think it's very pathetic for the rings to not be able to prevent him dying by having his soul sucked out. Seems very convenient for the plot.
Yeah. over the course of this 1,000 years, he's lived in a way that's very self-centered.
How was he not miserable?
I
How
think
was he not bored?
he was.
How do you not get bored?
I think he was just so consumed with with his sort of conquest to.
He was also like wanting to gain more power, and he was killing people, but he wouldn't have been gaining more power from killing people. There's nothing that says the rings absorb the power of those they kill.
No, but I think socially he'd end up gaining more power through removing those who also had power within the world.
Sounds like a very boring life.
Yeah, we can see that he wants his family, and he was so willing to accept his children back as long as they fulfilled their roles in his idea of what the family would do.
Well, he was a desperate man. He genuinely thought his wife was reaching out to him from beyond the grave.
Well, yeah.
And the thing is, I think that is one of the most believable motives that there has been.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I know what my wife's voice sounds like. He was a lost man without her. He loved her.
Yeah.
He was willing to give up everything for her. So, of course, if he thought that there was a chance of getting her back, he would want to do anything.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's the vicious side of him coming out with, if they won't let me in, I'll kill them.
Mm-hmm.
Not a very good way of honouring your late wife, but okay.
Like, that's what I was trying to get towards earlier, is that he had such a empathetic motive.
There was definitely, when, like, sending mercenaries after your kids and kidnapping them isn't, I can't really be empathetic towards that. But when he was talking about hearing his wife, and he wasn't really showing any like physical violence to his kids at first, like he throws them on the ground, but you know.
Yeah.
I was starting to wonder, I was like, is he the villain of this story, or is their mother's village going to end up being the villain?
Well,
of like they're hiding
because
the mother.
We although the synopsis claimed that the father was going to end up being the villain.
I did not see the synopsis either.
Yeah, well, the synopsis talked about how Shang-Chi needed to defeat his father. And so I was wondering whether or not that was true, or whether that was misleading to, have a twist in there.
I think I was definitely able to enjoy this more going into it knowing nothing.
Yeah.
Because I had no expectations.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how trailers these days especially, they give away way too much.
Mm-hmm.
They give away so much. The trailer is just supposed to draw you in and make you interested and make you want to go see the movie. You're not supposed to be able to guess the entire plot based on a trailer, but that's what's happening.
It was great to also see the difference in fighting styles, which is something they bring up within the story as well, when Shang-Chi goes to train with his auntie.
Because his dad taught him with brute force.
Yeah, he was taught the aggressive way of fighting, power, and even in his stances, closed fists, aggressive ways of posing yourself, whereas his mother and the way his auntie taught him were open-palmed, flowing like water. Water, I felt, was also a very big theme within this.
Yep.
Because, of course, there was the giant lake next to the village. There was the water. They created the map.
The dragon.
Yeah, the dragon. Yeah.
It's a water dragon.
Yeah.
The end credits.
The end credits were all water-based. He only had his real big revelation with the dragon while in water. And so I think that was sort of maybe getting towards the idea of flowing with life and, being adaptable.
Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming.
Yeah, that too.
And then, of course, they trap the big evil in the water.
And so there was definitely some clear contrasts which that weren't obnoxious, I feel. That they were clear, but they weren't, hey, look at this, look at what we're doing. It was very, if you were engaged, you were going to notice it.
Yeah. The place where his father, did they call it a compound or something?
Yeah, they did call it a compound.
His father's compound was very grey and rocky terrain and just all around. not a very welcoming place, whereas the village is bright and full of life.
Yeah, the compound isn't very militaristic, very cold, serves a purpose, isolated.
And then the main court, little courtyard area in the middle, their mother turned it into a garden while she was alive, because they didn't need it for training anymore.
No.
And then once she's gone, the garden, they get rid of the garden and it's being used for training.
Yeah, it becomes a training ground again, while having the Ten Rings logo right in the middle, because the Ten Rings have been something all throughout history that was a sign of violence, power, manipulation, terror, which was part of why it was used in Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 3, and I think there might have been some other instances of them within the MCU that were trying to be subtle.
I think the director also wrote the screenplay for this.
Oh.
Because it says in the little description, screen story.
Yeah. Screenplay and screen story written by the same. Yeah. And although it was, I think it was, 2.25 hours, although I think the actual, plot time was only just under 2 hours, it felt fulfilled to me.
I don't think the credits would have been more than 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. Oh.
And then when you factor in the end credit scenes.
Oh, yeah.
I did notice towards the start, I was losing interest a bit. We had the great introduction of his mother, and then it shifted to how he was living and being a valet driver. I found myself getting bored at that part, and I could feel myself losing interest, and I was a bit worried that they were going to lose me before it actually got good, and then I wouldn't be able to be as invested in it.
Yeah, I think that first wee bit after the opening title was the roughest point in the movie.
I feel like I imagine there's a lot of pressure on the writers of Marvel movies of the expectation for the movies to be at least 2 hours. I think that's become the norm, and now they're expected for that to be the minimum.
Yeah.
And because of that, pacing can suffer.
Yeah.
And clearly, with the runtime being 2 hours and 15 minutes, they were probably pushing to get there.
Yeah.
And that can mess up the pacing. But I don't know if there's any movie that has perfect pacing.
No.
There's always going to be lulls. It's just a matter of keeping your audience engaged during those lulls. Otherwise, you're going to lose them.
It's a trade-off of throughout the years we've wanted longer and longer Marvel movies because we wanted more and more out of them. But then the downside to that is that it's an investment to watch a Marvel movie now. You actually need to set aside the time for it.
And the thing is, with the MCU has become such a big thing. I think this is one of the few movies that you could watch without having to see everything else that's happened before it.
Yeah.
Because it's new characters. There's a couple of characters that come back, of course.
Yeah.
But this feels like one of the few movies where you don't need to have seen the others to be able to enjoy it. Whereas dedicated fans that have been there since the start or have gone back and watched everything are able to enjoy movies that carry on from each other. But I feel like it could potentially drive away new audiences because they don't want to have to watch hours and hours of movies just to understand.
Yeah.
Because when we went to go see Infinity War...
Oh, I remember I tried to force you to watch everything first.
I hadn't seen enough of the movies that I didn't understand the impact of so much that was going on.
Yeah.
Because I had only casually watched movies. I didn't really have a full grasp of just how big the MCU was. And there was a lot that I didn't understand. But then I did go back and I've watched most of the movies. There are some that I refuse to watch. I can't be bothered watching the Hulk movies. They don't seem necessary, in my opinion. Perhaps they are, but they don't seem like they had any real impact.
It was really just to introduce the character of Bruce Banner, and then now...
And then they recast anyway.
Yeah, they recasted, and it introduced General Ross.
Yep.
And then the Abomination. But these are things that they then were essentially just redoing in later movies because they knew people weren't going to watch Hulk.
Yep.
The Incredible Hulk. I've got to be careful between Hulk and the Incredible Hulk because those are two different movies. One is in the MCU, one is not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen either of them. It's kind of a shame that Mark Ruffalo didn't get the chance to have his own Hulk movies, but is he going to be in She-Hulk?
Yes.
So hopefully he'll, there's in one of the end credit scenes for this movie, we do see Bruce and his arm is in a sling, but he's back to normal.
However, I did see an article confirming that the Hulk and Banner combination form that we saw in Endgame is returning for She-Hulk. So I don't know whether that means that they'll be putting She-Hulk before Shang-Chi or whether Bruce has the ability to go between.
Yeah, I feel like it's possible that he has the ability to go between.
Yeah, because it seems as though that version of Hulk is definitely strong and mighty, but not necessarily as limitless as a pure Hulk is.
Well, yeah, because he's got the fears of Banner. He's got Banner's intelligence, but I feel like he's also got the fears of him too.
Yeah, and he doesn't have the blind anger that would continue the power increase.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited to see more of Shang-Chi. And I'm loving the MCU bringing lesser characters in, because I'd never actually heard of him before this was announced, and I'm glad to now be introduced to at least a version of the character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it, there's a lot of Marvel comics, and trying to keep up with all the characters is a full-time job.
Unfortunately, unless you are extremely dedicated to it, the idea of knowing all about a character these days throughout Marvel Comics history is nigh impossible, in my opinion.
And there's probably a lot of comics that have been lost to time.
Absolutely. And there will be people out there that will have had the dedication to go through these comics, read them, and learn to love the comics. And they may feel that others should do the same, but I think just the extreme amount that there is now, because Marvel Comics has been going on for years and years now. I think it might have been...
Didn't it start during World War II?
Yeah, it was around the 40s. So we're about 8. Oh yes, we just had the 80th anniversary of Marvel. Right. Yeah, and so, in 2 decades' time, which sounds like a long time, but who knows?
It's gonna go quick.
It's gonna go quick. We'll have the 100 years of Marvel Comics. Damn. And 100 years of comics. That's a lot to go through.
Yeah.
So of course,
especially comics that were like the earliest comics that were released.
Yeah.
A lot of them will be lost to time.
Lost to time, but then there are also comics out there that are just tough reads, either in the way that their writing was or the topics they cover.
Yeah. The propaganda that would have been in a lot of the earlier comics.
Absolutely. And propaganda and political messaging is scattered all throughout comics.
Yeah.
As well as maybe social ideas that may not be as acceptable, or
racial depictions.
Yeah. And jokes which maybe nowadays would not actually be seen as jokes.
Yeah.
Or they're jokes that just don't make sense anymore because we don't use that type of
we don't understand the time that it was.
We don't understand the
little
time.
inside jokes from pockets of time that we do not know.
I mean, I remember seeing an example of something like that. I think it might have been from an Avengers comic, where apparently it used to be slang for a real talk was hard dick. And,
That's right.
And I can't remember whether it was Iron Man saying it to Captain America or the other way around, but they were like, actually it was Captain America to Iron Man. He was like, "Shellhead, you look like you need some hard dick from the old cat."
That's right. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, this new slate of Marvel movies is way more diverse.
And people don't like that.
Unfortunately not.
I mean, so many people don't like Eternals, and I think a lot of the people that are saying they don't like it haven't even seen it.
Yeah.
The critics' reviews came out, and the movie was trashed, but the critics were a bunch of white men, and that movie isn't for them.
No.
I saw countless TikToks even of people that are part of different minorities that were represented saying, "We love this movie."
Yeah.
It's white men that don't.
Yeah.
It's because it's not for them.
That's part of why Shang-Chi also received a lot of disgruntlement towards it. I'm using softer words to describe how these films were received. I'm using softer words than I actually feel like using.
When it comes down to it, racism.
Yeah, there was. There were people being like, "We don't want an Asian superhero in the MCU. Why is an Asian superhero coming to the MCU?"
Yeah, I mean, I hold the opinion that the majority of Marvel fans only accepted the introduction of Black Widow and Scarlett Johansson because of the way her character was sexualized.
Yes.
Because people were so mad about Captain Marvel. Brie Larson gets so much harassment.
Yeah.
And people disguise it as, "Oh, we don't like the character." No. The MCU fan base has a huge... It's a bunch of white men.
Yeah. Playing world savior.
They are... And so many... It's a blessing and a curse for someone to join the MCU.
Yeah.
Because Seth and I describe it as job security. You've got a bit of job security. You're in this contract. I imagine it's a very well-paying franchise.
Of course.
You've got this job security of you can stick around for a while. It's going to make you very famous, and you're going to continue to get work.
Yeah, and you've gone down in cinematic history.
Yeah.
You've become linked to such a major landmark.
And even people...
Cultural landmark.
Even people that don't like the MCU or superhero movies, and they, give them a bit of shit, and they're like, "Oh,
yeah,
don't get white people." Regardless of what you personally think,
you know who they are now.
These people become A-list celebrities, and they're pretty much guaranteed work for the rest of their career.
Absolutely.
Or they will have made enough money that they could retire and live comfortably for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. However, to bring it all back to why we started talking today...
We have gotten very off topic. I think that's going to be a running theme.
Yeah, but I think that's something I like about this, is that we can begin with the film, but then also expand into how it relates to the wider world.
Yeah. Also, when it comes down to it, there's probably a bunch of movie reviews out there that are strictly talking about the movie and the themes within the movie.
Yeah.
But having a discussion, I don't know, it just feels a bit more...
And so
unique.
I'm very keen to watch this again, and I'm actually now very excited to look into more Shang-Chi media, and I look forward to seeing him again. I want to see him explore the world of martial arts. Oh,
do you think he'll probably learn the style of magic that like Wong and Doctor Strange use?
Potentially. However, something that I that was sort of in the back of my mind was the martial arts working with nature.
Yeah.
And to me, that is what The Last Airbender tried to do, but failed spectacularly. But we were seeing a better version of it here.
I don't think they're even comparable.
I'm glad they didn't put it behind a paywall like Black Widow.
Yeah. I wonder if part of that is because they didn't think people would pay it, whereas for Black Widow they knew people would pay it. But then also Disney got in trouble because Scarlett was like, hey, no. Pay me for this. I feel like it's more likely that Disney just didn't think people would pay it.
Possibly. So I think this was a great movie.
Mm-hmm. I think we've been introduced to some solid characters.
Absolutely. And also some development on some already established characters that we're seeing a bit more of that we couldn't with the bigger characters around, such as we didn't see much of Wong because we were focusing too much on Strange, and Banner in the more present times was being overshadowed by the Avengers, or other Avengers.
The big ones.
He is one of the big ones. I can't wait to see what the MCU gives us next.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we're good to leave this one here.
Yeah, thank you for talking with me.
Thank you for talking with me. Shall we shake on it?
Oh yes, we shall shake now.
Yes. You can say goodbye because I don't know how to do that.
All right, we'll see you all later for another discussion. Bye.
You didn't say toodles this time.
Don't judge me.